We are going to continue our study today about hearts on fire. A look at personal evangelism. Now, for those of you that were here last week, we're going to test your memory a little bit. See if any of you can remember just anything at all that we talked about. I'll be happy with anything. Just anything you can throw out that we talked about last week. What's that? You weren't even here. Personal evangelism, that's correct.
What's the first thing you felt after you were baptized?
Okay, so that's how we kicked the class off last week. We posed a question to the class. Just describe the feeling you had thinking back when you obeyed the gospel. And as you came up out of the waters of baptism, just to describe some of the feelings that you had during that time period. Now, anybody remember what some of the comments that were around that particular question? Elated, thrilled. I think relief was one that I reflected on a little bit this week. Is you think about who you were prior to going down into that water and compared to who you are when you come up out of that water. And we know that the water itself is water. What's special is what God does through His power when we're underneath that water. It cleanses us of our sins by coming in contact with the blood of Jesus, and that's part of what brings on those feelings of excitement and relief. Is just knowing what has been accomplished and knowing that your salvation is secure. All right? What else did we talk about last week? Oh, you're online? Oh, very good. Very nice. We talked a little bit about the how, not in terms of anything different than the method with what we're engaged in with back to the Bible. That's the method that we're anchored to. But we talked about just the importance of it and the significance of it. What else? Oh, that was a big one. Talked about prayer. And the fact that that might be one of the most underutilized tools that we have at our disposal when it comes to not just personal evangelism, but anything. We talked about prayer in terms of the church in the book of Acts, how prevalent it is. If you were to go back and just do a study of prayer in the book of Acts alone, and how significant you would see that prayer played a role in the lives of the early Christians. So, anybody remember what we ended on last week as far as our challenge for the week? What was our challenge for the week? Every day. If every one of us that were here last week would be committed to just praying for this congregation in terms of our efforts around evangelism, how significant that could be. We already have several Bible studies that are ongoing throughout the week by various members of this congregation. Who knows? Only the Lord knows the opportunity, the potential that exists for even more beyond that. So our challenge last week was simply to pray, for every one of us to be committed to praying for our efforts around evangelism. So this week we're going to continue on with our topic around a look at personal evangelism. I want us to start this morning by looking at our supreme example. And it doesn't matter what topic we are looking at in terms of our spiritual life, we only have one supreme example, and that's Jesus. And when it comes to personal evangelism, He is our supreme example as well. So what I want us to begin with is by going to the book of John. We're going to start in chapter 4. We'll probably spend a little bit more time here than anywhere else in terms of our study together this morning, although we're going to look at some other things as well. But I want us to start in John chapter 4. And we're going to read most of this chapter, if not all of it. And as we go through this chapter, I want you to think of it in terms of an experience in evangelism. I want you to read it through the lens of Jesus providing us an example and insight into personal evangelism. And let's just see if we can't make some observations together. I'm going to pose questions. I want your feedback again. If you weren't here last week, one of the things I said at the beginning, this class will only be as good as our participation together. This is not going to be a lecture-style class. It's going to require our thought together as we think about opportunities, as we challenge ourselves, as we look to grow in terms of personal evangelism. So we'll look at some questions together. We'll think about what we can learn in terms of evangelism from this chapter here. Let's begin at verse 1. Therefore, when the Lord knew that the Pharisees had heard that Jesus was making and baptizing more disciples than John, although Jesus himself was not baptizing, but his disciples were, he left Judea and went away again into Galilee, and he had to pass through Samaria. So he came to a city of Samaria called Sychar, near the parcel of ground that Jacob gave to his son Joseph. And Jacob which well was there. So Jesus, being wearied from his journey, was sitting thus by the well. It was about the 6th hour. Now, let's just make some general observations that kind of set the background for us about what's happening. Jesus is traveling from where to where? Judea to Galilee. Anybody know roughly how long of a journey that was? Depends upon the route. Generally speaking, if you took the most direct route, from my understanding, it's about a 3-day journey, if I'm not mistaken. Now, that more direct route took you through where? Samaria. Now, why would that have posed a problem for Jews? They did not despise is probably an accurate word. There is no question that there was a racial issue that was beyond probably even our description fully of how the Jews felt about the Samaritans. So, that poses in a potential solution of an alternative route that was a little bit further, could have taken a little bit longer. Whether through providence or whether through intervention, whatever the reason, Jesus chose the path through Samaria. But even that direct route would have been a 3-day journey. Jesus gets there about the 6th hour. What time would that have been, roughly, for you and for me? Noon. About noon. All right? So we're in the heat of the day. Jesus is in the middle of a 3-day journey. Don't forget, Jesus is 100% what? Human and 100% divine. He's the God-man. So his human side, what would he have been experiencing? Yeah, the normal things that you and I, thirst, hunger, weariness, there's no question. Think about the temperature, think about the journey. He had already been laboring previously to this. He hadn't been coming off of vacation. He's already working. Now he's continuing that work with his journey, and he's tired. He's hungry. He's thirsty. It's about noon, and he comes to this well. There came a woman of Samaria, verse 7, to draw water. Jesus said to her, "Give me a drink," for his disciples had gone away into the city to buy food. Therefore the Samaritan woman said to him, "How is it that you, being a Jew, ask me for a drink, since I am a Samaritan? For Jews have no dealings with Samaritans." Jesus answered and said to her, "If you knew the gift of God and who it is who says to you, 'Give me a drink,' you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water." So she said to him, "Sir, you have nothing to draw with, and the well is deep. Where then do you get that living water? Are you not greater than our father Jacob, are you, who gave us the well and drank of it himself and his sons and his cattle?" Jesus answered and said to her, "Everyone who drinks of this water will thirst again. But whoever drinks of the water that I will give him shall never thirst. But the water that I will give him will become in him a well of water springing up to eternal life." The woman said to him, "Sir, give me this water, so I will not be thirsty, nor come all the way here to draw." Now, what are some just practical observations you make as you think about this through the lens of evangelism? Just generally speaking, anything at all that jumps out to you. What's that? All right, so I think there's two things. I'll piggyback off two things you said. Dave said first in regards to the woman. She's a woman. She's female. Number two, she's alone. So there's two things significant about that. First, in terms of being alone, it's not common, or would not have been common, for a woman to come alone to the well to draw water. More than likely, a group of women would have come together. Now, we'll learn possibly as we go through this rest of the chapter why she might have been there alone, as we look at maybe some of her life circumstances. But the second thing is she's a woman. What would that have been in terms of Jesus' interaction with her? Well, it wasn't the norm, was it? It absolutely would not have been normal for a Jewish man to engage a woman in a conversation like that. So right out of the gate, we see Jesus going against what would be considered the norm of society. Now, I find it interesting to think about this particular story in contrast to what happened at the beginning of chapter 3. Who does Jesus encounter at the beginning of John chapter 3? Nicodemus. How different is Nicodemus compared to this Samaritan woman? They could not be at more opposite ends of the spectrum. Somebody describe Nicodemus for me. How would you describe Nicodemus? Would he have been educated or uneducated? Okay? He didn't understand Jesus' illustration fully, did he? We'll come back to that point. Let's set that one on the side and come back to that, because I think that's an important thing we can tie in here to the woman. Interesting. He came by night in comparison to the middle of the day. Nicodemus is an interesting study. He's not mentioned often in Scripture, but it's interesting to look at him in the situations where he's described. At least in chapter 3, his belief at least still seems to be guarded. There seems to be something there that he's concerned about his position and being willing to be open about that position in the light of day, if you will. So he's educated, he's got a position of power, he's a man. Now contrast this to the Samaritan woman. Uneducated, female, would have been looked down upon. Nicodemus, a Jew, she's a Samaritan. But what did they both need? Jesus. Isn't that interesting? So, right off the bat, one of the things we see without going any further is you have these two extremes. They couldn't be more opposite. So, we can learn off the bat when it comes to evangelism. No matter what separates us in society, whether it's socioeconomic status, whether it's race, whether it's gender, whatever it is that might make us quote-unquote different, there's one thing we all need, regardless of our background. That's Jesus. Everybody needs Christ. That's why we can read in Ephesians chapter 2 how we are brought together. We are united in Christ. We can overcome those differences because there's one thing we all need that brings us together, and that's Christ. So right off the bat, as we compare just chapter 3 in John to chapter 4, we see that common need in Jesus. Now, we've already said, what's Jesus' physical state here? Tired, probably hungry, thirsty, hot. Fill in the blank. There's a lot of things. We already know that from verse 8 that the disciples had gone into the city to buy food, which the fact that they had gone into Samaria to buy food says something as well. That probably tells you just how hungry they really were. But what does Jesus do when this Samaritan woman comes? He asks her for water, but what's his deeper purpose? Physical or spiritual? Spiritual. Now this is one that challenges me. I don't know about you. But see, Jesus, one of the things I take away right here from the beginning is Jesus' primary concern was always the spiritual well-being of others. That was his primary concern. Even in the moments when his physical needs were there, when he had the normal physical needs that you and I would have. And yes, he asked for water, but that really wasn't what he was after. His deeper need was to reach this Samaritan woman on an evangelistic effort, if you will. So it's interesting. We see then several things just from these first few verses that give us some insight. Any other observations? How does Jesus go about teaching? What does he use to set up this teaching opportunity? Yeah, he uses just kind of an everyday thing, doesn't he? He uses the well and the water, and he uses just a normal, everyday need to engage in a spiritual conversation. What another great example for us. Dave?
It says, in a large part, that her spiritual well-being was more important than his own physical needs.
Yep. So Dave's comment is, one of the things we can take away was that her spiritual needs were greater than Jesus' physical needs. That's a great point. Yes, sir.
It's no different than you stopping in the morning and getting your cup of coffee. You be getting up early and you're tired and you're stopping to get your morning coffee. You take that opportunity. Is that all you're going to have? Yes, just the coffee. Well, that's your end. Someone spoke back to you, and Jesus took that opportunity.
Yeah. Yep. I'll share just a personal example that I always think of. When our oldest daughter Sydney was, I don't know how old she was, maybe 3 or 4 years old, I can't remember. We were visiting some really good friends. She may not have been that old. We were visiting some really good friends from Montgomery, Alabama. And we were staying with them for the weekend. And Susan and I were in another room, and the wife was in the kitchen, and Cindy was in there with her. They were doing something in the kitchen. I think she was letting Cindy help her make breakfast. And she had no idea we were there. And they were looking out a window, and Cindy noticed how kids are. They're engaged in one thing, and just like that, a squirrel. They look out the window, and there's a bird out there. So Cindy starts getting interested in the bird, and this friend of ours, she immediately goes to make the bird. I didn't. She just immediately started engaging in just a conversation. It might have lasted 3 minutes, 2 minutes, 4 minutes. But I couldn't help but think there's just a seed planted in the mind. And Susan and I would just sit back and look at each other. Especially now, Cindy's grown and married, we look back and we think about how important that situation was. It seemed so insignificant potentially to the lady that did it to her. That was just a normal part of her day. Now think about how you and I can do the same thing just in our normal activities, whether it be with children. We think of evangelism in terms a lot of times of engaging in a Bible study with someone. Evangelism starts at a very young age. It's not just for adults. Evangelism starts from the time our children are as small as they can be. We start planting those seeds. And I think that's true in terms of evangelism with adults as well. It's about planting seeds of opportunity. You never know when those seeds might grow or blossom, or someone else might be able to follow up on that and have a greater impact. But it's just using normal, everyday opportunities to somehow open doors to engage. That's what it is.
One thing I noticed here, that Jesus approached this woman with his message, he met immediate resistance. She wanted to argue with him about it. I find that pretty common when I try to open a spiritual conversation with somebody. Most of the time, they have a tendency to want to argue with me about it.
Okay.
Usually try to turn it away from an argument. And I think we can use that example. We'll see if we can avoid the argument.
Okay.
So to speak, it seems to help a whole lot here. And so perhaps it will help us when we're trying to make that initial approach.
All right, so that's a great transition. Let's use that thought then to transition into a little bit different idea. So Leon starts to get into the woman's response. So here Jesus uses the everyday to start having a spiritual discussion. Does she understand? She totally misses it, doesn't she? Is that unusual for Jesus in his teaching? It happens frequently. Even the disciples struggle with that. Jesus commonly, even with his own disciples, would use things to try to make a point, and he would have to go a completely different route. So she doesn't understand. Now, whether she was a little bit argumentative or whether she just completely missed the boat, let's see what Jesus does, how he deals with that. Verse 16. He said to her, "Go call your husband and come here." The woman answered and said, "I have no husband." Jesus said to her, "You have correctly said, I have no husband. For you have had 5 husbands, and the one whom you now have is not your husband. This you have said truly." The woman said to him, "Sir, I perceive that you are a prophet. Our fathers worshipped in this mountain, and you people say that in Jerusalem is the place where men ought to worship." Jesus said to her, "Woman, believe me. An hour is coming when neither in this mountain nor in Jerusalem will you worship the Father. You worship what you do not know. We worship what we know. For salvation is from the Jews. But an hour is coming, and now is, when the true worshipers will worship the Father in spirit and truth. For such people the Father seeks to be worshipers. God is spirit, and those who worship him must worship in spirit and truth." The woman said to him, "I know that Messiah is coming, he who is called Christ. When that one comes, he will declare all things to us." Jesus said to her, "I who speak to you am he." Now, she doesn't understand at all. What did Jesus do?
Jesus cut to the chase to me.
Okay.
Jesus, when we reached why he was the perfect sacrifice because he was spiritual, who became flesh. We are flesh that are trying to transform, as you say, into the spirit. And that's what he's cutting to the chase. There are hours where we must live by the spirit.
Okay. All right. So the comment is Jesus Jesus kind of cut straight to the heart of the matter. Other thoughts on what Jesus did, how he approached it? And that's correct. So it's not that that's not just, I want to see if there's any other thoughts on how people see this or might read it. Okay. He goes straight into now using his divine, his ability to see the heart, his God side, to see the heart. And he opens a door that leaves no doubt for her. Okay?
Well, he takes what was the normal understanding of worship and applies in a new way for her to come to a new understanding.
Okay? So Dave says he takes what was understood as a way of worship and presents it in a way, a new way for her to understand that, to come to understand that. So all these comments together, yes ma'am? Okay, she had some type of base of knowledge there, all right, because she was coming. The thing that I see in all these linked together to me in this way is, when she didn't get it the first time, Jesus didn't just give up. He didn't just walk away. He didn't just say, well, just draw the water. You're not going to get this. He just took a different approach. He changed his approach to dig deeper to meet that need to help her see what she needed to see. He dug deep into the spiritual. I also find it interesting. You're right. Jesus wasn't engaged in an argument here. When I read that small section, if you really think about it, it's not a lot of words about her situation in terms of her marriage. We really don't have a lot of details. There are rabbinic traditions that would say during this time period, it was strictly forbidden or frowned upon, maybe is a better word. Looked down upon for a woman to be married more than 3 times. Even if they were legitimate, even if they were due to the man being deceased, there was just a rabbinic view that more than 3, that wasn't appropriate. Maybe there's an element of that here, but there's not really, if you look at the context of this whole discussion, Jesus' comments around this are small, but he doesn't mince his words.
Don't you think that he asked her about her husband in a way to show her the special godly quality about him? Also,
Sure.
he's very human, but he's let her know that he knows stuff that nobody else knows.
Absolutely.
There has to be that special quality there, and that's very encouraging.
Yep. So absolutely, that's a great point. He uses that. He uses his divine knowledge to see the heart, to share this information, to open that door so she would know who he is in terms of that great point. Yes, ma'am. Sure. Sure. So the comment is, and I think this goes back to the point that was made earlier too, about there seemed to be some foundation here of understanding of the Messiah that was coming and who he was. There's no question there were other gods, quote unquote, with a little g. Even the fact that it talks about verse 1 that Jesus was making disciples and baptizing disciples, more disciples than John. There were even others baptizing during that time period. But there's only one Messiah. There's only one Christ. And Jesus uses this opportunity. When he starts out using the physical to try to get to the spiritual, she misses that. He continues down. He doesn't just walk away. He opens other doors to continue that conversation to where she has, if you'll pardon the expression, that aha moment. Where she gets it. She sees, wait, you know things that only, she at least views him as a prophet. Even if she doesn't fully understand him as the Messiah as of yet, at the very least she's understanding, hey, there's something about him that you know this information. Now, any other comments or thoughts around those particular verses? Yes, sir.
I noticed nowhere in here did Jesus ever get a drink of water.
Yeah. Well, in fact, we'll continue on to see, even when there's opportunity, that he's going to continue on the spiritual. So let's keep going. Verse 27. At this point, his disciples came, and they were amazed that he had been speaking with a woman, yet no one said, "What do you seek?" or "Why do you speak with her?" So the woman left her water pot and went into the city and said to the men, "Come see a man who told me all the things that I have done. This is not the Christ, is it?" They went out of the city and were coming to him. What does a woman do? She evangelizes, doesn't she? How does she do it? Come and see. You think she understood fully everything? No way. I'm not even convinced at this point, and this is open for interpretation, but I'm not convinced fully that she understands who Jesus is. I mean, the fact, I read verse 29 with her still asking the question, "Come, see, could this be?" I don't think she understands fully who Jesus is at this point. She doesn't. She runs back. Her excitement is so great. She runs back. She's not concerned about whether she can answer the questions of people in this village. She's not even worried of the fact that she's a woman at this point. She just wants people to come and see.
Or that she has a shepherd past.
Oh yeah. So thanks for bringing us back to that. That's correct. Go ahead, Tim.
A bit later, the men say, after they heard Jesus speak, they said, "Now we believe, not based on your testimony, but because we heard ourselves."
Yeah.
So there was some separation in them based on what they heard from themselves.
Okay. So Tim's point is their faith may at least have started with what they heard from her and then was continued on when they heard from Jesus. What can we learn from this small section right here when it comes to us and our evangelism?
We don't have to know everything.
Boy, that's an important point, I think. Because I think sometimes we put so much pressure on ourselves to feel like I've got to be ready to engage. The point was made earlier about arguing or debating. I'm not engaged in an argument or a debate. Our job is just to tell people about Jesus. That's what we're supposed to do. We don't have to know everything. All she said was, "Come and see." What a better form of evangelism can you think of? Just come and see. And if somebody were to say, "What about this?" Just come and see. Come and see for yourself. Let's open the Bible together and see. Let's come and see what the Bible has to say. We don't have to know every answer. We're not trying to win an argument. We're not trying to win a debate. We're not trying to do anything other than say, "Come and see. Come and see who Jesus is. Come and see what God's Word has to say. Don't take my word for it. It's not about me." Yes, sir.
She had a significant emotional event in that Christ said to her, about the husband. So when she went back out to the city and responded with what she said, the same way when you get into a Bible study with someone, you're going to have a significant emotional event when the Word speaks to you. It might not be about a husband or whatever, but something in the Word, the power is in the Word that's going to cause that person to, "Oh my, I lost. I need Jesus."
Yeah.
So the significant emotional event, I think.
So I described that as the aha moment earlier, right? So that might be a little different for all of us depending on our background, is how I think I would maybe summarize. Yes, sir.
Don't be concerned about your own reputation, possibly, on how you come across to others because of their reputation.
Okay. So let me phrase that this way. Dave made this point earlier. This woman had a checkered past, we'll say. But did Jesus use her? Absolutely. Again, I can't help but think sometimes we're our own worst enemies and harshest critics. We beat ourselves up, we think that we can, or maybe God can never use me in a certain way. God used this woman to go back and to say, "Just come and see." And who knows how many were actually impacted today.
In our back to the Bible tool that we make available, I'm not stepping on the point that we made, but the three presuppositions or premises that we present is exactly illustrated in this lesson here. Plant don't fit. It's not Nicodemus or the Samaritan woman. It's all. And show don't tell, where she says come and see. And infer don't debate. So the same
Meanwhile, the disciples were urging him, saying, Rabbi, eat. But he said to them, I have food to eat that you do not know about. So there's the point, that Jesus continues to put off his own physical needs because there was a spiritual need at the moment. Once again, the disciples, they're not quite getting it. But I do find it interesting, though, even though they had some of these questions, nobody asked them to Jesus, because I kind of get the sense they're learning. They're understanding that even though they don't always get Jesus' point, they're trusting him, because they've seen it now over and over. So Jesus once again uses the physical to make a spiritual application. I have food to eat that you do not know about. So the disciples were saying to one another, no one brought anything to eat, did he? Jesus said to them, my food is to do the will of him who sent me and to accomplish his work. There's a mission statement right there. There's Jesus' mission statement. Summarized in other ways to seek and save the lost, but it comes down to this. It's doing the will of the Father. That's what you and I ultimately are charged with. Just to do the will of the Father. Don't overcomplicate it. Don't make it harder than it has to be. Just to do the will of the Father. Verse 35, do you not say there are yet 4 months and then comes the harvest? Behold, I say to you, lift up your eyes and look on the fields that they are white for harvest. Already he who reaps is receiving wages and is gathering fruit for life eternal, so that he who sows and he who reaps may rejoice together. For in this case the saying is true, one sows and another reaps. I sent you to reap that for which you have not labored, others have labored, and you have entered into their labor. Now, let's tie in the point that was made just a moment ago. Jesus' illustration, the agricultural illustration. At some level, his point is this. When it comes to farming, there's a normal growth period. There's a planting and there's a harvesting, and it's normally separated by a certain number of months, 4 months. When it comes to the spiritual, there are people that are ready to hear now and respond now. So I think that ties in to the point that was made that this Samaritan woman, it seems that she had some level of knowledge there, a base to draw from. Might have even been looking for something, but just needed some help. But she was ready. When Jesus approached her, when he engaged her, she was ready to respond. Then she immediately went back. And it's easy for us, I think, a lot of times to get discouraged when we think about personal evangelism, because we think so much that as we look out in the world, society, and it seems becoming more or drifting further and further away from God, that we sometimes think, where's the fruit? We don't ever need to forget that if we'll just keep sowing seed, there are souls that are ready to respond even now. They just need to hear the gospel. Yeah, Luke.
You know what I mean? Not just for food, but, he was thirsty and hungry, obviously.
Yep.
And like Rick said, we've all been in that position of getting drink coffee or waking up and thinking, first thing you want is something to eat or drink, but to me, if you apply that to anything, you have somebody interested, and you tell them, hey, we'll plan on getting together this kind of weekend or something. If you have something you got to get done that week, they're not canceling.
Yep.
It's not just food.
Yep. So Luke's point, I summarize this way. We have to be ready to strike on the iron side, right? One of the key things we need to take away from this is simply this. When people have an interest, we need to meet that need immediately. We don't need to put it off. Because if we put it off, who knows if that opportunity will ever present itself. So there are some that are ready to respond now, but then there are others that maybe we plant a seed, and maybe somebody else does the harvesting. Or maybe we do the harvesting from a seed that was planted years ago by somebody else. At the end of the day, whatever role we are given to play, we just need to fulfill that role. Whatever it is. In the moment that we're given, just fulfill that role. Are there any other comments about John chapter 4?
Yeah. This speaks to all of us. We all want to put it off. We like to think for some reason why it would be better if we waited until X time to begin a new Bible study, to present a certain point that we have laid on our mind with somebody that we're working with already. There's always a tendency
Yep. So let me tie a few points together here, just to maybe takeaways from this for us. One is this, and it's the point that has been made earlier. When the opportunity is there, don't put it off. Take advantage of it while it's there. Serve in whatever way that we can. Just give them a cup of water, give them a cup of water. Whatever we can do to encourage somebody else. And then the other thing that I take away from this is the role the Samaritan woman played. Just go and tell somebody, come and see. Think about Andrew, if possible. What do we know about him? Brother was Peter. There's really not a lot about Andrew in Scripture, is it? What's the one thing we read that Andrew did?
Come and see.
Brought his brother. Come and see. How significant a role did Peter play? Would he have ever been there if it wasn't for his brother Andrew? Speculation, but we know why he was there. Because Andrew said, come and see. That's basically all that's mentioned of Andrew in Scripture for the most part. Think about how significant his role is in the Lord's church by that one invitation that we read about to come and see. Peter preached the first gospel sermon, give him the keys to the kingdom. Open the kingdom in Acts chapter 2. All because Andrew said, come and see. Powerful lesson. No. So that's a whole other point I missed. The Samaritan woman, she came to do what? Draw water. What did she leave? What did she do with her pot when she left? She left the pot, didn't she? Now maybe she left it for Jesus to draw the water, I don't know. But whatever was important to her when she got there wasn't nearly as important when she left. Yeah, she was so excited. All right, we're going to skip through for the sake of time a little bit of this here. All right, I do want to do this. Let's go to 2 Timothy chapter 2. Somebody would read for me 2 Timothy chapter 2 and verse 2.
And the things that thou hast heard of me among many witnesses, the same committed to the faithful men shall be able to teach others also.
All right, what's the pattern given here for evangelism?
Once you learn, teach
Once you learn, teach
it to someone else.
to someone else. What did the Samaritan woman do? Once she learned, she shared it with somebody else. You think about the illustration of the chain and the links of the chain. That's kind of how I view this. Every link is important to the next link. Each one teach one. You and I have a responsibility that as we learn about Jesus, from the moment we come up out of the waters of baptism, just to share that excitement. With whatever ability we're able. Come and see, send a text message, write a note, make a phone call, send an email, over a cup of coffee, whatever your opportunity and ability is. Encourage somebody else that you see doing that till you get more comfortable to go do it yourself. Pray about it. Whatever it is, each one teach one and pass it on philosophy. All right. The Great Commission, Matthew chapter 28, verses 18 through 20. You ever find it interesting? What does Jesus do right after these words? What does Jesus do right after he speaks these words? He ascends to heaven. Don't you find it interesting that these are his last words? I can't help but wonder if the apostles, before these words were uttered, maybe in some form or fashion thought that their work was over. That maybe their work was engaged in that 3-year ministry with Jesus while he was on earth. But Jesus, in the most convincing and profound way possible, tells them, your work is just beginning. It's not ended, you're just getting started. Because now your responsibility is this. You go out and do what? Make disciples. What's a disciple? Follower of Jesus. You go out, you point people to me, Jesus is saying. You elevate me, you point people to me. If you and I will convert people to Jesus, a lot of the things that the religious world wants to get wrapped up in, I will find that those start to take care of themselves. Because when people are converted to Jesus, His words become what's most important. You can't separate Jesus and the church. They're tied together. Jesus purchased the church with His blood. The saved are in the church. You can't separate those. If we will convert people to Jesus and teach people who Jesus is, how important His words are, the whole reason for book number 1 and back to the Bible is to do what? Establish what? Authority. Whose authority? God's. Through Christ. The words of Jesus. The words recorded in this book. Our responsibility to convert people to Jesus is a mission of the church. It's a mission for you and for me. You and I just need to ask ourselves this question. How do we view it? Do we view it as a matter of life and death? See, that's the hard part. And listen, I struggle with this. I lose sight of this too. It's so easy. I think Satan uses this against us in a profound way. We get so busy with our lives. I do. We work hard, we come home, we've got family obligations. There seems to be something we can be engaged in 24/7. We just got to start remembering that there are souls that we come in contact with every day. Preacher once said, if man has a soul, which he does, can that soul be won or lost for eternity, which he can? Then what becomes the most important thing in the world? Soul. That's something for you and me to consider. All right, let's conclude with this. When it comes to evangelism, when we think about rekindling that fire, let's not forget our example. Let's not forget the example of Jesus. John chapter 4 is not the only one, but certainly it's a good one that we could review on a regular basis in our own personal study. There are things that we didn't touch on today that you would find as you study that chapter on your own. We've got to bear fruit. John chapter 15, we didn't get to go into this very much. First few verses there, what's the illustration that is used there by Jesus? Vine and branches. What are the branches supposed to do? Bear fruit. How do they do that? By staying connected with what? The vine, to Christ. You and me individually are the branches. Jesus is the vine. The religious world, I know, tries, unfortunately, uses that in an incorrect way. When you look at it in context, they like to say that the vine is Jesus and the branches are churches or denominations. But that doesn't make sense because that particular passage had that meaning in the original audience. The church wasn't even established at that point in time. That was still to come later. When Jesus uttered those words to His disciples. So individually, we are the branches. We're to stay connected to Jesus. We can do that by studying our example. If we will do that and put it into practice, we're going to bear fruit. We need to have compassion on others. That's a hallmark of Jesus' ministry, is compassion. He cared about people. And we need to follow the model of each one and teach one. All right, let's end with this. Stay focused on the mission. Our challenge for this week is simply this. I want us to continue praying, but I want us to get a little bit more specific in our prayer this week. Continue to pray for us as a congregation as we engage in evangelism in a broad way. Now I want you to start thinking about one person. Just one person by name in your life that you want to pray about that doesn't know the gospel yet, that hasn't obeyed that gospel message. Pray about that one person by name. That opportunity will present for you or for somebody else to play a role in simply saying, come and see. That heart of that person will be open to coming and seeing.